Hello, hello. It's that time of
Hello.
the week. Got some new faces as our host. This is the reunion tour, right, Nick? Because it has been a hot minute since you and I have been back together in the co-host chairs. But welcome to the Watson Weekend, you guys. I'm your host, it's Jessica Lesesky.
And I am Nick Kaplan, back in action with you, Jess.
That's right. It feels like home. It feels like a coming home tour. But yes, we are your weekly dose of medicine with just enough sugar to make it go down a little bit easier. We're the place that you go to every week for news on the world of retail, tech, e-commerce, supply chain, tariff. What don't we cover, Nick? We've got a lot going on.
If it's commerce, SaaS, we cover it all. But
but we're not professionals,
no,
right?
no. I mean, I feel like every week we get a little bit closer, and I certainly am far behind you guys. But the emphatic no.
Yeah.
But we do have a wonderful sponsor that does believe in us in the show, and we believe in them. And because traditional commerce is just code for like not growing, it's time to do better than the status quo. So there are 450 plus retailers who are scaling 6x faster with AI, automation, and a platform built for what's next, which is very important and in line with the show. Marketplace, dropship, and retail media at enterprise-grade scale, which is important. It's time to accelerate with Miracle. So thank you, Miracle, for sponsoring us. It is a great product, and we loved having them as our partner.
Absolutely. And we are a live show. So while you've got, again, the best co-host, we are minus Rick Watson. We've got Nick in the seat. We're a live show. Please comment. We have so much to cover today. We're really excited to talk to you about, there's lots of news happening in the world of retail. It's literally never stopping, which is pretty interesting. But then we're going to also talk about why it's important in this time where you might be cost cutting. We know you've got fiscal responsibility. You're analyzing budgets. You still have to invest in yourself and invest in networking. And so we're going to talk about the Lead Summit coming up and why that one should be on your bingo card, especially if you're a brand. So before we hit it, we're going to get into the headline hangover, which is brought to us by Passport. And Nick, why don't you? We'll roll the clip and then we'll get started.
The headline hangover. So we're going to start with one of my favorite companies and products to talk about, Klarna. So I have been a huge fan of Klarna for a while. Watched them go from BNPL to really, in my opinion, being like a super affiliate.
Yeah.
And they were really, really, really bullish on AI and did a huge layoff around AI. And we're very vocal about its impact in the workplace. And, spoiler alert, they're rethinking that strategy.
Walk it back.
Yeah, they are definitely walking it back. And, I think it's a really interesting moment, right? There was a speech given at Klarna headquarters, which is in Stockholm. And, I think that it's almost like an overreact. I am curious to hear what you think, but before that, I'll say there's an amazing company out there. It's young and it's solving a really big problem. And in my network is a very credible private equity / venture capitalist. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, you guys should check this out. And he's like, we are only looking at AI right now. So I think that this is kind of emblematic of like the world, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like you said, this was kind of the HR statement heard around the world, if you will, right? When they first announced we're cutting our workforce, we're going all in on AI. It's permeated in every part of the organization. We're actually not going to hire more people because of AI. And we are at the forefront of companies doing this right. So it was interesting to see the walk back. And yes, it was tailored around customer service specifically. But it kind of, I guess, begs the question of, have we gone too far with this whole AI statement that it's going to like coming for every single job, especially when a company like Klarna is saying, hey, we do have a customer service problem and we can't have our quality of work being impacted because we're all in on AI and we're not going to have people in seats to actually talk to our customers. Is that really the message here?
Yeah, I think it is. And I've been saying for a while, um, what AI is the ability on some level. This is not, it's a little bit of a blanket statement, but it's just like supercomputing power. It takes many, many angles. It can compute complex equations, and it does so with just like ferocity, right? It's like
Yeah.
fast. And so I do think that to be able to get where's my order, to be able to understand past behaviors as future predictions, that's all great. But when you're dealing with a product like Klarna, where an unspoken but large part of their revenue stream is the penalties that come with late payments, and there
Right.
is a high degree of subjectivity, like AI can't solve for all of that. There is going to need
Right.
to be some human decision making. So
That's right.
um,
And if you have a panicked customer at the end of that and they're trying to get through to someone,
of a retailer, that's your
yeah,
brand, right? So
yeah,
it's like not even
yeah.
your customer, right? So
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
But I thought you
So
said something really interesting right before we go on to the next topic, which is you said they were doing it like they were one of the first ones to do it right, and I would
yeah,
say they were one of the first ones to do it.
sure.
And
Yeah,
I think that like it's going to be really interesting to see. I think not for this week's headline Hangover, but next week maybe. OpenAI came out today with something called, I think it's called Code AI, that like essentially targets to be the coder of the future. So I think this is a really interesting topic to watch, which is like really, does AI, when does AI stop and when does human kind of management start?
right. Absolutely. And that will always be the interesting needle to thread, if you will, of
Yeah,
what companies do and where and how it works. So, in also evolving business models, maybe a company that didn't embrace change as fast as they should. Weight Watchers has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And it is its clinical business segment. It's not the entire company. But it does affect the part of the company that it acquired through its telehealth subsidiary. I think it's tough. It's been tough for Weight Watchers for a while, right? They had this legacy business model that was all about creating plans and point systems. When the world has really moved on to protein shakes and powders and pills, and now you have GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy that really have kind of changed the game in terms of how Americans or just the world at this point views weight loss. So they've had membership declines. Oprah last year pulled out of their board. When Oprah leaves, that's kind of, it becomes dark days.
no bueno.
So, and really the story here is the company does have a ton of debt, and that's like a boat anchor around your neck, right? When you have $240 million in debt, it's really tough to claw out of that. So, what's your take on this one, Nick?
Yeah, it's funny. People sort of start talking about the Ozempic effect. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
almost like half kiddingly, but it's real, and I don't think it's going to stop at Weight Watchers. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to unpack in here with a broken business model and with a lot of real estate and not a lot of cash in the balance sheet. The inability to turn it around shows, and then what ends up happening is more private equity comes in. But what a lot of people don't talk about is the private equity people put in like a part of the capital, and then they go out to the credit markets and they find that capital and they put that capital on the company's balance sheet and its
Right.
debt. And so I think we just had a perfect storm of probably a bad business model, completely disrupted by the internet. I mean, why in the world would you not just go to ChatGPT today, but a few years ago, just go to Google and say,
Sure.
what is the best way for me to achieve my goals of X and get it for free, the most powerful word in the English language?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think that it's for people to understand about what subscription services and memberships are like and how you keep people. how you think ahead and disrupt your business model, but how when you do private equity, no matter if it's like prime private equity or distressed private equity, it's all a dance with the devil. And oftentimes this is the outcome.
That's right. Especially if you throw in some acquisitions on top of that, you've got a nice little formula for you're digging out of a hole.
Well, I mean, right. Speaking of,
Speaking of holes,
right. I mean, this is where I'm always so happy to be with you, Jess. I feel like
I know.
we're simpatico. But I think there was a super, super, super interesting transaction met with some mixed feelings yesterday when it was announced that one of the premier, I think actually it could be even argued from a point of view, the premier retailer at the moment,
Yeah,
Dick's,
yeah,
acquires Foot Locker for 2.4 billion,
yes,
$24 a share. And I think there were a lot of people like, wow, this is a deal that makes sense. And if you read the press release, the executive chair talked about their consultation with Nike before making the deal, and I think there's something to unpack in there as to what this means. But then a lot of the financial markets are like, wait, why is a really amazing retailer taking on a troubled retailer like Foot Locker? And Foot Locker is in, I think, 20 or 21 countries. It now puts the Dick's total footprint at over 3,000 locations, which is a really big number. I think the revenue is over 20 billion. And I think this is a story of leverage. I think they're saying that the businesses will run independent of one another, but I think oftentimes, whether you're like a single store that's buying your competitor or you're a conglomerate, a giant retailer that's taking on an additional asset, you need to think about leverage points. And so I don't really see this as a bad thing. I think Dick's knows how to operate. I think that Nike is looking with its new leadership, right? Elliott is trying to drive to better distribution. And all of a sudden, you now have this like conglomerate of 3,000 plus stores that are going to be able to sell all these sneaker brands,
yeah.
lean into the vendors. So I like it. I think it's great. What do you think?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I do think it'll be interesting to see where some consolidation happens and what that means. But, Foot Locker and Dick's Sporting Goods have had different footprints as well. Like Dick's Sporting Goods ends up being more in your like shopping center, shopping locations, where Foot Locker has traditionally been embedded in malls and in that format. And so what does that mean for them? And the other part is, to your point, just control of the market. So they also have a large assortment. They have kids. They have champs. They have, a lot of different types of brands that reach different audiences, and how will Dick's leverage that? So it'll be pretty interesting to see what shakes out. And I don't really ever question Dick's, to be honest, because they seem to have it going on, and they've controlled inventory really well. So I'm sure they'll shore that up. And it'll just be, I think, a nice coming together of two brands that will leverage each other's assets. So I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, I think that it will be interesting to see how they combine loyalty and how they make it kind of worthwhile. But
yeah,
I do think that there's a lot that Foot Locker will benefit from a cost perspective in terms of just probably getting some benefit, and it's just buys right away. But then on some of its private label brands, the fabric purchases, the expertise, and the margin improvement, as well as most likely being able to go to the landlords, getting a little bit of a break. So I think it really is a win for everybody. And I agree with you. I really trust in Dick's. I think that what they've done, if you had said to me, a few years ago, as they embarked on the strategy of more interactive retail, I know you, as a North Carolinian, have like a pretty big Dick's in your area.
yes.
Right? The kids go. I mean,
My kids love it. It's actually like the place they asked to go to. So
what's interesting is they buy, right? Like they don't just go to hit balls in like a cage, and they don't just go to like check it out. Like it's the destination. Like I'm going to where I'm going to go to Dick's.
Right. Right. Well, and especially with athleisure, and I'm sure, you have girls, I have boys. So we have pretty much it's sports 24/7 in my house. And it's also the only clothes I can get my kids to wear. It's hard pressed to get them to get out of either sweatpants or some type of athletic wear. It's 24/7, and Dick's is the go-to place. So
I think that's a really interesting point, and it'll be interesting to see if with Foot Locker, like as I think it now about it in my head, there's this kind of like association with status and sneakers still, and I think
Yes.
that um, the unique nature of hard to get or um, I don't know, just like really special. I wonder if Foot Locker becomes even more specialty retail versus sneaker and becomes an outlet for those types of things more so.
Yeah.
I think that that would be interesting to see, but I definitely think that it becomes it becomes different on like day one. I think it's a really excellent story. Happy to see a brand and a business that's very mall based for the retailers and the community and people that go there to stay alive.
Right.
And Dick's, I think, is gonna knock it out of the park.
Yeah. And who said deals weren't going to get done in 2025? Pretty cool, right? Skechers, Foot Locker. We got some things happening.
I mean, but it's
So
interesting, right? They're happening. They're happening.
they're
And I think
happening.
it's an interesting kind of topic overall that kind of continues to run through the show, which is like this is a really, I would like to say unique, but I'll just say interesting and dynamic time. And I think Dick's has been talking about this for a long time, and they were like, you know what, this is the time to do this deal. So I do think that deals are getting done because the prices are right and the world needs it, and so
Yeah,
people are capitalizing on it. So
that's right. Well, you talked about Dick's being a dominator in the retail space. We also had Wally World, as my mom calls it, aka Walmart, just put another stake in the ground of how much of a dominating force they are as they announced their earnings. Revenue was up 2.5% year over year in their fiscal Q1 26. From a US comp perspective, the Walmart sales were up 4.5%. Sam's Club saw 6.7% increase. Ecom globally up 22%. I mean, they just keep posting very high double-digit growth in e-commerce. And even in the US, the domestic market, it was up 21%. So that is, I think, a pretty far cry from, maybe it was 15 years ago, Nick, when people were just really down on Walmart and they would never be able to be a formidable competitor to Amazon. And I think it's pretty interesting to see the fortitude to their strategy, especially with marketplaces, which grew 36%, really being the driving force of, hey, don't count us out. Like we've got it going on. So it was pretty interesting to see how they just keep posting these wins time and time again, every single earnings. Right?
yes, I mean they're also the best, right? I think if you want to
Yeah.
talk about Dick's and what they've done, Walmart and what they've done. I was on the call with someone yesterday who's over in the Australia, New Zealand world. And they mentioned Woolworths, right? Because that's still a thing
Right.
in Australia, right? And it did make me think back. I mean, Walmart, I think people viewed as maybe a potential Kmart or Woolworth, right? As like what eventually might happen to it.
Mm-hmm.
But talk about like setting a course and sticking to it and
Yeah.
really making all the right bets. And so there's an incredible grocery business. It's just incredible. So they have that to rely on. They're just in unparalleled in sourcing and supply chain
Mm-hmm.
and logistics. And so they have built this model of efficiency and continue to capitalize on it, making good bets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're asymmetric, right? So they're sort of like a test, learn, capitalize versus just
Yeah.
betting. And I really am impressed with Doug McMillon, with the strategy that they have and their continued growth. I
Yeah.
found it interesting that they like hedged out in
They
the
did.
call. What did you think about that?
Yeah, look, I think that they are being cautious because even with the temporary reduction on tariffs for the pause for 90 days, they operate on very slim margins. And Rick and I talked about it back in, was it, I don't know, it feels like a blur, but was it March, February when these tariffs were initially announced and Walmart essentially went over to their Chinese suppliers and said, listen, you own this, not us. I don't know that those conversations really played out the way that they thought. And so they are going to have to absorb this, which means they're passing some of it on to consumers because of how slim their margins are. And they've been operating on everyday low price as the mantra since inception. So they just can't really continue to do that. And so when they start to signal, look, prices are going to go up, the market reacted and has concerns because people are going to tighten their wallets. And even in the earnings call that Walmart did for in February, they did allude to the fact that they're seeing people by the end of the month shorten up their spend on a weekly basis in groceries. They buy smaller packs, they, choose to trade down, or they just eliminate items altogether. And they watch those receipts like clockwork. So they have seen this change in spending behavior, and they know as they raise prices, it's going to have an impact on the overall wallet share, I guess, that they're ultimately able to capture because it's just not there.
100%. But yeah. I do think, and there's a lot to unpack in that, but a place where AI does work is the analysis of the behaviors and trends of consumers and what exactly that means. I think for all the brands and operators listening to this, beware. Walmart's sort of actions, though, they're a bellwether for all of us.
Sure.
So I think that inventory kills, and what I think Walmart's doing is they're trying to essentially message the everyday low prices to keep turns going. My sense is that unspoken, but they're trying to keep inventories in line to mitigate risk and leave some top line on the table and turn faster. And that's why a lot of what Rick and I talk about when we're working with clients is GEMROI, right? We are in a world where we can measure demand, which they do as well, if not better than anybody, and build supply. And so I think I don't know that they needed to be as cautious, but I think it was a responsible thing to do and something that the market's probably overreacted to, but that operators, brands, businesses need to really take notice of.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is, there's a question here from Miles. We think Dick's is going to help compete with Frasier's or JD in the UK. Is JD next for Dick's? What do you think, Nick?
Yes, I think it's probably not it's not why they did the deal, but I'm sure that as much diligence as they did, as long a time as it took, and as much as they involved Nike in it, I literally think Nike had a seat at the table. I think they probably had their own bankers. I mean, I think it was part of their, their strategy. But I think that they're looking to compete globally. Nike is full of problems. However, still, it's still the brand for the world, right? It's not Golden Goose or On or it's Nike, and it's in every kid's house in one way, shape, or form. And so, yes, I have to think that they said we can leverage this relationship, do incredible things, and put them internationally, and kill everybody in every market that we can because we're better than them all.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for hanging in with us. This is a bit of an extension on Headline Hangover, but there were some really meaty stories. Chemistry. Yeah, that's right. There's some meaty stories to get through, and we wanted to give them the fair shake that they deserve. So, when we talk about pivoting to what we're going to cover a little bit more in depth today is you have said a lot, Nick, evolve or die in Kaplan's Corner. We've heard this pretty much be a steady drumbeat for you. One of the ways that people do evolve is they learn from their peers and they learn in networking. And the best places to do that are these events, but not everybody's got the wallet to go to all of them. And so how do you pick? Where do you go? Where do you spend time? We're going to talk about one today, the Lead Summit. But before we get into that, Nick, you want to kind of highlight the tour and give us your take?
Yeah, it's a great topic. And by the way, it's not just here in Kaplan's Corner in work. I tell my kids evolve or die. So imagine, because we are also 24/7 sports. But I've known Noah for a while, and Sonal, and I spoke. It's where I met Rick. Actually, it was a few years ago. He moderated a panel I was on. I think events are super important, and as we've kind of developed our partnership, and they're doing so many different things together, we're going to do something at the Lead which is going to be, I think, pretty amazing, because to your point about education and opportunities and really, looking at learning from other people's mistakes or wins. So Rick and I have partnered and worked with Noah and Sonal at the lead, and I'm really excited for the audience to hear what they have to say in a minute. But we're going to be doing walking tours. And so I have not seen this done yet, and I think it's a pretty interesting opportunity for people. So what we do is we essentially work with brands solving their problems. And what we really look at is technology, which is what is the right investment to make? What's the return on that invested capital? How do you leverage that tool? Because it's not tools that save companies, it's people that save companies. So we're going to give a few walking tours in the space, literally like walking with people and talking about like, this is what's happening in CRM. This is what's happening in loyalty. This is what's happening on the front end. This is where you can opportunize and optimize your customer database. This is technology. So it's going to be super cool. I'm a little biased, but I really do believe that having a third party, an independent person that's not you, to talk about the non-emotional right business decisions and where to make asymmetric bets, which I talk about all the time, is something that we're going to do. So I'm excited for it, and hopefully people will sign up and join us and make our first foray into education and a walking tour success. But with that, like, I know if you were coming to New York, Jess, you'd dive right in on that.
100%.
Yeah. Our biggest fan.
That's right. Absolutely.
But Rick had a really interesting conversation with them.
Yeah, let's roll it.
Cool. We take you back to early 2018.
Yeah.
Everlane was becoming the new Gap. Glossier was becoming the new L'Oreal. Warby Parker was taking over Lens Crafters and Pearl Vision. And this direct to consumer business model was really being perfected. So we said to ourselves, or I said to myself, at least at this time, there's a gap here. There's a need here. Brands need to understand how to compete in this world and this shift.
What is it about this space, and are you targeting a slightly different community than these other events, or the content or the experience? Like, what's different? Like, how do you position yourself, in the list of, events that someone potentially could attend?
So Rick, there are events for retailers and there are no events for brands. So we really needed to have a conversation for everyone from, again, like from Chanel to Clorox and in between. And that's why the direct to consumer business model, while it's not what we focus on entirely today, it's where we started. So what's different? What's different is, first of all, we're big enough to be relevant, but small enough to still be boutique. We love lifestyle brands. Our focus is apparel, accessory, footwear, beauty, home, health and wellness, food and bev, CPG. We love looking at emerging brands, right? The ones that are trying new things, charting new courses.
So we're a 2-day show. We can't boil the ocean. So it's really curated and based on what have I heard in the last 6 months that everybody's talking about, that we need to have a conversation on stage. And we put up, people on stage that we think have something to share, interesting stories, interesting learnings that they have had in the last year or two that they can then share with the audience. So conversations that we're having this year, for instance, are, in marketing. There's all these influencer marketing and content, but also this year we're putting up something on sports marketing, because that seems to be a lot of brands, even brands that were not traditionally doing sports marketing, now getting into. There are lots of brands being built on TikTok, so we're having a conversation on that. We're also having the general conversations from these brands' perspective on how to use AI, what gimmick and what's value.
I'll leave this with two things. One is the Lead Summit is kind of the flagship event that we do. It's the kind of the zenith of the apex of our year. But these two things back here, the Foremost 50 list and the Direct 60 list, is kind of the foundational research that we do that drives everything throughout the year. So check that out on thelead.co. And the other one I'll say is, and I'll kind of leave it with Sonal, we chose this year's theme as Destination Unknown.
Are you old enough to remember the missing persons?
Yeah.
Unknown, right?
Yeah.
You think he was thinking about that?
Yeah,
No,
maybe.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's lots of different shows that exist. The Lead has its own really point of view that they've shaken out on this brand experience, and the speakers are really impressive. And so, Nick, kind of, what's your take on why go to the show? What are people going to get out of it?
So, if I could go back in time, and we have the QR code for you guys to register now to get involved. I would have gone to these shows like far earlier on for a number of reasons, right? So this business is built around community. I think the RMW brand has a large community. There are many communities out there, and you need to be part of them to learn and to get ahead, not just for the way you operate day to day, but for your own network. So I think just getting out and meeting people is important for your own brand. Equally as important is the content that these shows put on is not always the best, but pretty good. And I think that you have to be kind of discerning about who you want to see and what you want to learn. But like, there's so much rich content for you to just absorb. And here, like, I launched successfully on TikTok shops, or I was a direct-to-consumer business that had to pivot into omni. There are people that talk about these experiences, and it just takes a couple of kind of like light bulb moments to really be like, oh. And so I think education is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, and while I don't see a ton of deals getting done at these shows, there is an opportunity, especially at a show like the Lead, that's a little bit smaller, for example, than like a Shop Talk or a CES, obviously. But there's the opportunity in these like smaller booths and formats to talk to people. So you can go up to the person at retention.com, which I did, and I'm like, I don't get it. How does this work? And they're like, oh, this is how it works. You really can fully understand versus like listening to people saying this is this or this is that, positive and negative. So I think that there's a lot to be gained from getting to the dinners or the events to meet people and just have fun, to build community, and do that through physical contact, which I think is even more important in this world, and really get an education and hear from people firsthand what has been great and what has not been great, and then go out to those vendors on the 2 days on the floor and talk to them and inform your own opinions.
Yeah.
So I like this show too, I'll say, because I do think that Noah and Sonal do an incredible job, put a lot into it. They do 3 events, not just this one. They do the Foremost 50 and the Direct 60, which are also super cool. And I've been to those to really get and learn about brands and up and coming and established. But it's New York City. And I think that while you're here, you can see some of the best retail in the world. I think that, so, I mean, you've been to these shows before, and you have a far more illustrious career than I. So tell me, like, what have you gotten out of these shows over time? Have they been part of your like thing?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think I was fortunate enough because initially I started my career in B2B SaaS. So it really set the precedent of how important those shows were to build network, reconnect with people, as you said. And in this industry, as you know, the community and your network is so important. And what I've learned over the years is even your competition, you have a lot to learn from and gain insight. So I think that that's been really helpful. You talk about community, being able to bounce ideas, just say, hey, we're in the trenches. Like, what are you experiencing? Are we having shared experiences? What are you seeing from consumer behavior? What are things that you all are doing that are different? And to your point on the vendor side, as I've moved over to more the brand retail, it is so interesting to be in one place and be able to connect and see all those different technologies versus if you had to have those conversations individually in your day-to-day life, like they probably wouldn't happen because you wouldn't have the time to like research or review them or reach out, book a Calendly, whatever, right? It's just so much easier to have that conversation one-on-one, because most of the time, full disclosure, and to all of you, vendors out there, I do ignore your emails, and I'm sorry, but I've got about 100 others to churn through, and maybe 100 other Slack messages. So it's just the reality of getting in touch that way. It's just not really conducive. So,
and I agree with the comment from Miles, right? I think as to what the purpose is, for these shows. And I think that they serve different purposes. I think you go to Shop Talk, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. It is certainly the one show I would say that everybody should go to, just because it's an epicenter. Like, everybody goes. It's Vegas, but the objective or the intention for me when I go to Shop Talk is to sort of, it's more just getting networked and like listening, right? Like, the show is big. It's hard to like talk to vendors and have more of those type of conversations. I will say, like, an example for everyone listening is right before I left Shop Talk, I did a table talk, like, meaning I attended one. And from that, I was able to gain from the conversation. It was like 6 people that TikTok shops is driving a ridiculous amount of traffic to Amazon, because people on TikTok shops consume content, but want the trust and the speed of the purchase. Yeah. So like, with a lot of different people I work with, that's been a seminal point, like 100% taken from that conversation.
Yeah.
The lead, I think, is more intimate, and I think you'll have an opportunity to sort of have those conversations one-on-one with vendors. It's not like Target is competing with you for time at a booth, right? And I think that that's kind of what happens at Shop Talk. So
and I mean, I think that you guys have some pretty cool things happening in partnership with Passport, this Tariff Feud. So it's some kind of family feud game show.
I can't believe I was invited to be part of that. I don't know. I'm getting invited to things, but full disclosure, right? Rick and I we have an office together. And it's like, he sits like over there. He's not here today, but Rick, I will say, goes like the full distance. Like, meaning when he gets into, like, one day he walked in here in like a full like bunny suit for Easter last year. And I'm like, what's happening? Yeah. So it should be a really fun event. There will be some good garb attire, and I mean, it's Family Feud, but I encourage people, it is worth investing to go to these shows. It is so easy to cut the expense. So easy. But you have to invest in growth. You have to invest in education to be able to grow. And you want to minimize the downside risk of the bets you have to make.
Sure.
Like, in the best of times, you have to make bets. But in the worst of times, it's 20 times more important. So when you come to a show like this, you're like, it's like almost therapy. It's like, hey, I'm really in trouble, or hey, I'm having a problem I need to solve. Guarantee you'll find someone that can actually help you answer that question, and you can be vulnerable and get help. It's like we're all together.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Well, this is a great place to wrap on the lead. Really appreciate Sonal, Noah, to walk us through that. I have one more question for you, Nick, before we kind of head out for our weekend. You've been held hostage for a couple of weeks now. I'm just doing a wellness check. How are we feeling here?
Still held hostage.
Oh no!
I had maybe I'll get invited back next week for an official Kaplan's corner, and
of course
Kaplan
you will.
Held hostage. But yeah, I thought it would be better. I mean, I'm still not what to make of it. It's better for 90 days, but the kind of tough thing for people is, and I'd be curious to hear your take on this as well. Like, what do you do? I mean, there's a 90-day reprieve. Great. So we're at 30%, not 145%. But like, you can't trade on that.
No, uncertainty is very difficult, right? And
yes. Or a uncertain time.
I guess does this get you through a period where you have more confidence to place your orders for the fall? Make sure you have what you need to stock the shelves for the holidays, although it still might be less, but not as drastically less. And I was actually listening to a podcast about the de minimis impact specifically in China and in the garment village in the district there, where Shein has basically been the driver of their volume for so long. And there are places that are either closing, the orders have already been reduced significantly, and factories looking at relocating to Vietnam or somewhere else. And so I think that's the other thing that you're dealing with is this own disruption happening because of de minimis at the same time of the de minimis loophole being closed at the same time of the tariff situation. So it's a little interesting to watch. So
yeah, so much unknown, and I think that Scott Bessent, I don't want to like agree with him that there was we had enough goods to get us through holiday. I mean, there are clear bad things happening as a result of these tariffs to small businesses on both sides. But I will say that the de minimis thing is big. I think that's not something we talk enough about just as an industry, the impact on Amazon sellers, the impact on consumers that are buying all that stuff. And I am I'm on the board of Goodwill New York and New Jersey, and it's
see the Shein hauls end up in
it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it is crazy what happens to these products. So I'm happy about that, but I am still, to answer your question, I'm still like really uncertain, definitely held hostage, and strongly encourage people to be mindful of inventory. That's all I keep saying is like inventory. Like, you're better off missing sales than liquidating inventory, because liquidating inventory and this type of environment and the cash that it ties up, it's death.
It's hard. It's
forget
rough.
about your margins.
Yeah.
So
margin
in turn, my friend, margin in turn.
Well, look, until then, you got to find the happy places, and we're going to do what we always do. We're going to dance it out and get excited.
This is my one happy place.
It is.
The only happy place I might have, actually.
Little shoulder shake. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
We're dancing.
Enjoy it. We're going to do it.